I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when my phone rang, one of those weekday rings that carry a tone of obligation rather than affection. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Denver, sunlight spilling across the edge of my desk, reflecting on the spreadsheets that had defined most of my adult life. I balanced the phone between my shoulder and ear, still typing when I heard my mother's voice. "Samantha, honey, we need to talk about Jessica's wedding." That particular softness, half pity, half performance, told me everything before she finished the sentence. I stopped typing. "What about it?" I already requested time off. There was a pause long enough for dread to settle in my stomach. "Well, that's the thing. Your father and I were handling the travel arrangements, and somehow we forgot to book your plane ticket. And your hotel room. Everything's booked solid now, it's peak season in Maui." For a moment, I just listened to the hum of my computer fans and the slow drip of the coffee machine. My family's voices had always been the background noise of my life, constant but unremarkable. But that day, every word cut through me like glass. "You forgot? These things happen, sweetheart. We've been so busy with the planning, and Jessica's been such a handful." She gave a nervous laugh, the kind mothers use when they hope you'll do the forgiving for them. "We'll take lots of pictures for you." I looked at the photo pinned on my cubicle wall, Christmas morning, the four of us smiling under garish lights. Jessica's arm around me, the golden daughter, Danny beaming with mischief, my parents proud. In that frozen moment, we'd looked like family. But the truth was there too, in the angle of my smile, the half-step back I always took to make room for everyone else. "That happens," I said flatly. "Oh, I'm so glad you understand," she replied, missing entirely the weight in my tone. "Your sister was worried you'd be upset. You know how sensitive she gets." After she hung up, I sat there for almost an hour, the cursor blinking on a half-finished report. When I finally stood, something inside me shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I opened a new browser tab and began searching, not for flights to Hawaii, but for something entirely different. That night, I typed a short note to my manager requesting a meeting the next morning. By lunchtime, I'd asked for a leave of absence. "A year?" Patricia repeated, eyebrows high behind her glasses. "That's unusual. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," I told her. "I just need some time to figure out my next steps." She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "You've carried this department for 6 years, Samantha. If anyone deserves a sabbatical, it's you. Take it." I sent one message to the family group chat that evening, "Not going to make the wedding, but I hope it's beautiful. Taking some time for myself. Going offline for a while. Love you all." Jessica replied within minutes. "Wait, what? Where are you going?" I didn't answer. Instead, I closed my laptop, packed a suitcase, and began dismantling the life they'd forgotten to include. Within a week I'd sold my furniture, stored my car, and rented my apartment to a coworker. The day before the wedding, I boarded a plane, not to Hawaii, but to Tokyo. Japan greeted me like a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Neon and quiet, chaos and order. I stayed in hostels, ate from street stalls, and learned to bow more than speak. I wandered temples in Kyoto, rode trains through rain-streaked countryside, and somewhere between the bullet trains and the incense smoke, the anger began to burn itself clean. My grandmother's letter came to mind then, a letter that had arrived on my 25th birthday along with a modest inheritance. "You have always been the quiet one, Samantha. The thinker. Use this wisely. Make yourself proud. I had invested every penny. Now, years later, I was finally spending it, not on comfort, but on discovery. From Tokyo I went to Seoul, then Bangkok. I didn't post a single photo. For the first time in my life, I existed without an audience. In Chiang Mai, I enrolled in a 6-week digital marketing course taught by expats who believed in late nights and strong coffee. Data had always made sense to me, patterns, flows, optimization. But now it meant possibility. I learned how online businesses scaled across borders, how culture shaped consumption. Meanwhile, every time I opened my email at an internet cafe, there were dozens of messages waiting. Where are you? This isn't funny anymore. We're worried sick. I read none of them. Instead, I took a train south to the islands, where sunsets melted into water and strangers didn't ask for last names. In Hanoi, I met Helen, a tall Australian woman with sun-streaked hair and 15 years of stories etched into her skin. She ran a small export company linking Vietnamese artisans to buyers overseas. The trick to disappearing, she told me over coffee, is realizing nobody's really watching. You find out who you are when the noise stops. What did you find out? I asked. She smiled. That I'm a hell of a lot more interesting than my family ever thought. We became friends, and she taught me the nuances of international trade, how to spot craftsmanship, negotiate across languages, bridge expectations between worlds. My background in pharmaceutical supply chains turned out to be surprisingly useful. By month 4, I had helped her coordinate shipments for a ceramic collective in Hue. When the first container left the port, Helen raised her glass. To Samantha, she said. Finally using her powers for good. I laughed, but when the payment hit my account, a modest commission for weeks of work, I felt something powerful. Pride. Not the quiet kind that waits for applause, but the private kind that stands on its own. I moved like a ghost through Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Laos, back to Thailand. Markets became my classrooms, bargaining my language. I learned to gauge trust by the way a merchant wrapped a parcel, by the hesitation before a handshake. By month 6, I had clients of my own, small workshops and independent makers who needed guidance to reach Western markets. I built spreadsheets on cafe counters, sent proposals over spotty Wi-Fi, and little by little, I stopped being invisible. My family's messages shifted tone, from anger to concern, then guilt. Please, sweetheart, just tell us you're alive. Sam, I'm so sorry about the wedding. Dad hasn't been sleeping. I didn't respond until one evening in Bali when a new email arrived. The subject line, from Dad. Attached was a short video. He sat at his desk, tie loosened, eyes weary. Samantha, he said, voice trembling slightly. We forgot about you. That's the truth. We were so busy making Jessica's day perfect that we forgot our other daughter existed. There's no excuse. Please, just let us know you're safe. I love you. I watched it 3 times, then closed the laptop and walked down to the beach. The tide was coming in, silver under the moon. I realized then I wasn't angry anymore. What I felt was cleaner, sharper, clarity. For years, I'd made it easy to be forgotten. Reliable. Predictable. The one who didn't need checking on. I had been complicit in my own invisibility. The waves hissed over my feet, and I whispered into the dark, no more. By month 8, I had relocated to Barcelona. The city pulsed with a rhythm that felt like reinvention. My consulting network had grown. I spoke passable Spanish, fragments of Thai and Vietnamese, enough to bridge worlds. Then one morning, a message arrived on LinkedIn. Samantha, I was given your name by a mutual contact. We're seeking someone experienced in Asian supply chains for a consulting contract. Would you be interested? The sender, Victoria Reynolds, Senior Buyer, Apex Pharmaceutical Distribution, Chicago. I stared at the screen, heartbeat quickening. Apex was a direct competitor to my old employer. I replied, I'm interested. I'm currently based in Europe but available for video consultation. Her response came within an hour, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. The video call changed everything. Victoria appeared efficient and unflinching, the kind of woman who could dismantle a budget and rebuild it by lunch. I'll be direct, she said. We're bleeding money on our Asian supply chain. I've heard you cut shipping costs by 30% for 3 different clients in 6 months. How? I explained, relationship-driven negotiation, regional logistics awareness, cultural respect. She listened, expression unreadable, then said, most consultants talk theory. You talk results. I want to offer you a 6-month contract. Remote work. Substantial pay. The figure she named made my breath catch. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. But I'll need an answer by Friday. When the call ended, I sat in the co-working space staring at the city outside. This was it, the door I hadn't even known I was waiting for. That night, I emailed back one line, I accept. When do we start? Her reply came within minutes. Monday. Welcome to Apex. Denver looked the same, but I didn't. The air still had that sharp mountain bite, and the skyline glowed gold at dusk, but everything that used to feel heavy now felt smaller, almost manageable. // I walked out of the airport with one carry-on and an inbox full of congratulations from strangers. Apex had sent my contract that morning, Regional Director, Western U.S., effective immediately. The taxi ride downtown was silent except for the hum of the tires. Buildings flickered by like old photographs. 6 years earlier I'd stared out of this same window after another business trip, thinking about promotions that never came, supervisors who praised me but never saw me. Now I was returning with a title that none of them would ever reach. My new office sat on the 14th floor of a glass tower in Lodo. Floor-to-ceiling windows, pale wood, chrome fixtures, sterile and beautiful. On the door, Samantha Gray, Regional Director. I stood there a full minute before turning the handle. Inside smelled of new carpet and opportunity. I set my bag down, touched the glass, and whispered, "You made it." The first 2 days blurred, equipment deliveries, onboarding calls, meeting Victoria on video from Chicago. "Build your team fast," she told me. "You're the point of contact for everything west of the Mississippi." I understand. And Samantha, make it yours. So I did. I interviewed candidates non-stop, looking for people who weren't impressed by titles but by ideas. That's how I found Patricia, sharp, pragmatic, 40, with the kind of directness that scares men in meetings. "I know who you are," she said during the interview. The analyst who vanished came back running circles around her old company. "That story's exaggerated," I said. She smiled. "Good. Means there's room for a sequel." She became my operations manager within the week. 2 others followed, a logistics coordinator fresh out of grad school and a data analyst with a dry sense of humor. By Friday, our little office hummed like an engine. Still, when the building emptied each evening, silence crept back in. That's when I checked my messages, dozens from my mother, a few from Jessica, one from Dad, short, cautious. When can we see you? I ignored them until the silence felt heavier than the risk of breaking it. Finally, one Friday night, I texted, dinner. Downtown. Sunday. Neutral ground. The restaurant smelled of rosemary and hesitation. They were already seated when I arrived, Mom smoothing her napkin, Dad adjusting his glasses, Jessica and her husband whispering, Danny pretending to check something on his phone. When they saw me, they all stood at once, like actors missing their cues. Sweetheart, Mom said, voice trembling. Look at you. Saturday, let's just eat. The waiter poured wine. Forks clinked. Nobody spoke. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. We owe you an apology. A real one. Mom blinked fast. We never meant. He stopped her. We did. We forgot you, Samantha. Because you were easy. Because we could. The words landed like stones. Jessica looked down, whispering, Dad. No, he said quietly. It's true. I took a sip of wine. Thank you for saying it. Mom reached across the table. We want to do better. I hope you do, I said. But I'm not coming back to the version of me you remember. Jessica's eyes shimmered. You've changed. I had to. Being forgotten teaches you what you're made of. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then Danny muttered, we missed you, Sam. I missed me too. The tension broke into small, awkward laughter, fragile but real. We finished dinner talking about safe things, weather, flights, the view from my office. When we left, Mom hugged me too long. Come home next Sunday, she whispered. We'll see. Work didn't wait. Monday at 9, Victoria called. How was dinner? Educational, I said. She chuckled. Good. You'll need that patience. We've got a bigger problem, our competitors are undercutting contracts in Asia. Someone's feeding them intel. Trevor's name burned in my mind before she said it. Think it's him, she asked. I know it is. Then let's make him irrelevant, she said. Denver's your base. I'll handle Chicago. You do what you do best. I spent the next 2 weeks tightening every bolt of Apex's Western operations, audits, new vendor lists, direct communication lines. Efficiency became my shield, precision my weapon. Every success chipped away at the ghost of the girl they'd overlooked. Then one morning, my assistant walked in holding her phone. There's a man here asking for you. Says he's an old colleague. Name? Trevor Holt. For a second, time folded in on itself. The cubicles, the fluorescent lights, the feeling of being invisible, they all came rushing back. Send him in, I said. He entered with the same polished grin I remembered, expensive suit, practiced charm. Samantha. Wow, this place is impressive. Thanks, I said, motioning to the chair opposite mine. To what do I owe the visit? He laughed too easily. Relax, it's just coffee. Heard you're back, thought we could catch up. Maybe compare notes, our companies seem to keep running into each other. I leaned back. That's one way to describe copying my playbook. He blinked. Excuse me? You've been chasing the same suppliers, offering the same terms, 3 months behind me every time. His smile faltered. That's business. No, Trevor, that's imitation. He looked at the skyline instead of me. You always were dramatic. And you always mistook silence for weakness. I stood. Enjoy your coffee. Samantha, wait. He sounded less certain now, more human. Look, there's no need for hostility. We could collaborate. I don't collaborate with thieves. When the door shut behind him, I finally exhaled. Patricia poked her head in. That the infamous Trevor? Formerly infamous, I said. Now just unemployed and doesn't know it yet. She grinned. Remind me never to get on your bad side. That evening, Victoria called again. Words traveling fast. You shut him down publicly? He showed up uninvited. I ended it politely. Politely? I didn't spill the coffee. She laughed. Good. The board loves results with style. Which brings me to your next move, promotion. Vice President of International Operations. You'll present your 2-year plan in Chicago next week. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Vice President. A title that would have taken decades at my old job. Say yes, Victoria said softly. Yes. When the call ended, I walked to the window. Denver glittered below like a map of every choice I'd ever made. 1 year ago, they'd forgotten to book my ticket. Now, entire industries waited for my direction. The night before the flight to Chicago, Mom called. Your brother told me about the promotion, she said. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Thank you. I know I've said this before, but I really am sorry. I know. There was a pause, the kind that used to scare her, but now belonged to me. Maybe when you get back, we can have dinner. Just us. Maybe, I said. We'll see. When we hung up, I felt the calm of someone finally steering her own story. / Chicago greeted me with wind that cut through even the thickest coat. The skyline was steel and glass and ambition stacked to the clouds. / I arrived the night before my board presentation, rehearsing in my hotel room until the numbers felt like pulse beats under my skin. I'd built entire supply chains across 3 continents, negotiated contracts that saved millions, and learned to hold silence like a blade. Tomorrow, I would prove it. The Apex headquarters looked like confidence carved into architecture, marble floors, mirrored elevators, glass walls reflecting a city that never slept. Gregory met me in the lobby, his handshake firm. Nervous? Focused, I said. He smiled. Good. The board respects results. Show them what I already know. The conference room was colder than I expected. 7 board members, Victoria at one end, Gregory at the other. I stood in the middle, remote in hand, projector humming softly behind me. The walls were covered in charts, maps, data streams, the visual translation of my year in exile. I started with Vietnam. This was where Apex learned to listen. Local partnerships, cultural respect, trust before profit. Then Prague. Expansion through empathy, not dominance. Every slide carried a story, every number a scar from the journey. One of the board members, a silver-haired man named Jacob, interrupted. These examples are compelling, Ms. Gray, but they're regional. How do you scale compassion globally? With structure, I replied. Compassion doesn't mean chaos. It means clarity of purpose in every culture we touch. Another leaned forward. You're proposing decentralization? I'm proposing evolution, I said. Global efficiency built on local expertise. We stop pretending we can manage every market from Chicago. We start trusting the people who live there. The room went still. Even the hum of the projector felt like it paused. Then Diane, the chairwoman, elegant and unreadable, spoke. You left your previous employer a year ago, she said. Traveled the world, built something from scratch. Why Apex? I hesitated, not out of fear, but because the answer mattered. Because Apex gave me the one thing I'd never been given before, space to prove myself. They believed in potential, not pedigree. That's what I'm building here, a company that sees people before it sees profit. Diane nodded slowly. And where do you see yourself in 5 years? In this room, I said. Still building. Still leading. And making sure no one who deserves to be seen ever feels invisible again. The silence that followed was electric. Then Gregory smiled. Thank you, Samantha. We'll deliberate. I stepped outside, pulse thundering, into the corridor lined with windows overlooking the river. The city lights blurred in the glass, and for a moment, I saw both versions of myself, the girl who'd been forgotten and the woman they could no longer ignore. 20 minutes later, Victoria found me in the lobby. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were shining. Congratulations, Vice President, she said softly. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. Then I did. And it felt like standing at the edge of a new continent. They announced my promotion the next morning. Emails poured in like a flood, colleagues congratulating me, competitors pretending to be gracious, recruiters offering ridiculous salaries. And then there was one message that stopped me cold. From Martin Reynolds, CEO, Denver Pharmaceutical Distribution. Subject, congratulations on your new role. Samantha, congratulations on your success. I wish we had recognized your talent sooner. My door is always open if you'd like to reconnect. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. By spring, I was spending more time in airports than apartments. Apex was expanding fast, and my division was the spearhead. Meetings in Singapore, audits in Berlin, negotiations in Buenos Aires. Each success pushed us further ahead of my old company, and further from the version of myself who'd once waited for permission to speak. But revenge wasn't the goal anymore. It was precision. I wanted to build something so stable it could stand without me, something that would last longer than resentment. At night, in quiet hotel rooms, I'd open my laptop and look at the old family chat. Sometimes I'd type something, then delete it. Some distances are better preserved until you can cross them without bleeding. Still, Mom tried. Sunday dinner? She'd text. Just us this time. Maybe next month, I'd reply. 6 months into my new role, Apex owned 28% of the global market. My old employer had dropped to 18. The press called it a shift in the pharmaceutical tide. I called it proof. The numbers told a story of every night I'd worked unseen, every moment I'd swallowed instead of shouting. Each percentage point was a piece of myself reclaimed. Then one morning, Victoria called. We're restructuring the board, she said. And Gregory has a proposal, you'll want to sit down. I laughed. You're about to tell me something wild, aren't you? You're being nominated for a seat. Youngest in company history. The words hit harder than any promotion. A board seat wasn't a title, it was permanence. Influence. Legacy. When the vote came through 2 weeks later, I stared at the email for a long time before whispering, "Grandma, I hope you're watching." That night, I took myself to dinner. Alone, but not lonely. I ordered wine, a perfect steak, dessert without guilt. Across the table sat the ghost of the woman I used to be. I raised my glass to her. "Thank you," I whispered, "for surviving long enough to become me." A week later, Trevor's profile disappeared from LinkedIn. Word spread through the industry, he'd been let go after a string of failed ventures. I should have felt satisfaction, but what I felt was distance. He wasn't my rival anymore. He was a chapter I'd already closed. Mom texted again that night. Saw the news about the board appointment. "So proud of you, sweetheart. Dinner Sunday?" I typed back, "Maybe. I have a flight Monday. I'll check my schedule." Then I looked out at the Chicago skyline, the lights stretching endlessly, like runways waiting for takeoff, and smiled. They had forgotten me once. But in that forgetting, they freed me. My first year as vice president passed in a blur of airports, deadlines, and boardrooms that smelled faintly of ambition and freshly printed contracts. // I used to think success would feel like arrival, like stepping onto a stage to applause, but it was quieter than that. It was walking through an airport at 2 a.m. knowing the company wouldn't crumble if I disappeared for a week. It was hearing someone else quote my strategy in a meeting and realizing it had taken root. I built my division around one principle: partnership over power. The world didn't need another empire, it needed cooperation that actually worked. I watched local managers in Vietnam and Prague train their teams with the same patience I'd once used to teach myself how to negotiate across language barriers. That was my legacy, more than any number on a chart. Still, sometimes the past knocked. Mom would send pictures of Sunday dinners, steaming casseroles, Dad carving roast chicken, Jessica's children with frosting on their cheeks. I'd scroll through them on flights, the soft blue of my laptop screen reflecting against the window. I'd smile. Then I'd close the lid. Jessica started calling every few months. The first time, her voice cracked like a forgotten melody. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, "about not asking about your life. You were right." I didn't gloat. I just listened. "Tell me about your work," she said finally. "The real version, not the headlines." So I told her, about factories in Bangkok where artisans signed contracts that changed their futures, about negotiations that felt like chess played with cultures instead of pawns, about the quiet joy of competence. She listened, asked questions, even laughed at the absurdities: shipments delayed by monsoons, time zones that turned days into loops. When we hung up, she whispered, "I'm proud of you." For once, I believed she meant it. By summer, Apex was everywhere: North America, Europe, Asia, South America. Each quarterly report felt like vindication, but also like distance. Success has a way of making the ground beneath you less solid. You start walking on clouds, high, bright, and slightly unreal. One night in Singapore, after signing our biggest Southeast Asian contract, I found myself at a rooftop bar staring at the lights below. The city pulsed like circuitry. I took out my phone, hesitated, and called Mom. She answered on the first ring. Samantha? Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. I just wanted to hear your voice. She exhaled softly. You don't know how happy that makes me. We talked for nearly an hour, about ordinary things, not wounds. Dad's garden. Jessica's kids. The new cat that hated everyone except him. Somewhere between laughter and silence, the years between us began to soften. When I hung up, I realized forgiveness isn't a single moment, it's a series of small choices. That night, I chose one. Months passed. Seasons blurred. I moved from hotel to hotel, city to city, carrying my life in a single suitcase and a hard drive full of futures. But every time I landed in Chicago, I visited the same small Italian restaurant 2 blocks from the office, the one with warm light and a corner table that felt like mine. The waiters knew me by name even when I changed my hair or arrived jet-lagged and half alive. One evening, Victoria joined me. She looked tired but content, the way people do when they've built something worth their exhaustion. You know, she said, swirling her wine, I wasn't sure about you at first. I laughed. You've mentioned that. No, I mean it. You were untested, unpredictable. I took a gamble. And you turned out to be the safest bet I've ever made. That's a dangerous thing to tell a gambler. She smiled. Then let's raise the stakes. That was the night she told me about Apex's next phase, acquisitions, mergers, global expansion. It would mean more travel, more responsibility, more everything. You in? She asked. Always, I said. Back in my hotel that night, I looked at the skyline again. Success wasn't revenge anymore, it was stewardship. I was shaping something bigger than my pain, something that would outlive every apology I'd ever wanted. But there was still one piece unfinished. The next morning, I booked a flight to Denver. When I walked into my parents' house for the first time in nearly 3 years, the smell hit me, cinnamon, lemon cleaner, old wood. Mom froze in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand. Samantha? Hi, Mom. Her eyes filled instantly. She crossed the room, arms shaking, and hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. You came. I did. She pulled back, wiping tears with the towel. Your room's exactly how you left it. Please don't tell me that. I'm 30. We both laughed, awkward, genuine, healing. Dinner that night felt like rewriting a memory. Dad asked real questions. Jessica listened instead of performing. Even Danny, perpetually sarcastic, seemed to hold his words like they mattered. Somewhere between the laughter and the quiet, I realized something simple. I didn't need them to understand everything. I just needed them to see me standing there, whole. After dessert, Mom took my hand. I know we can't undo what happened, she said softly. But I'm grateful you didn't give up on us. I squeezed her fingers. You didn't give up on me either. Not completely. That night, I lay in my childhood bed staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling. I remembered the girl who used to lie there dreaming of leaving. I wished I could tell her that leaving wasn't the end of love, it was how she'd learn what it really meant. Back in Chicago, the next Monday began like any other: emails, strategy sessions, new hires, but something in me had shifted. The weight of old anger was gone. I worked with clearer eyes, sharper focus. And maybe that's why Gregory called me into his office at sunset. You've done more in 2 years than most executives do in 10, he said. The boards asked me to groom a successor. My seat won't stay empty forever. Gregory. He held up a hand. Not today. But soon. I just wanted you to know it's yours if you want it. After he left, I stood by the window and watched the city turn from gold to night. For the first time, I let myself imagine what came after the climb, the view from the summit when ambition gives way to peace. I thought about the girl who didn't get a ticket to her sister's wedding. The woman who boarded a plane to Tokyo instead. The leader who turned exile into empire. And I whispered to the glass, "You're enough now. You always were." It started with a letter, an actual envelope, cream-colored, hand-addressed in Jessica's looping cursive. I almost didn't open it. Physical mail from family usually meant guilt wrapped in stationery. But curiosity won. Inside was an invitation embossed in gold. Jessica and Brandon invite you to celebrate the christening of their daughter, Emma. A note was tucked inside. Please come. It would mean the world to me if you were there. Love, Jess. I sat with it for a long time. The weight of paper is strange, it can hold entire histories. / Part of me wanted to toss it in a drawer and pretend I never saw it. Another part, the one that still believed in trying, wanted to go. When I called Mom that night, she sounded cautious, like the ground between us was still fragile. You got the invitation? I did. She really wants you there. We all do. Even Dad? He said he'd behave. I laughed quietly. That's new. Samantha, she hesitated. You don't have to say yes. But I think you'd regret not coming. Maybe she was right. Maybe forgiveness was like travel, you had to buy the ticket before you were sure the destination was worth it. So I said yes. The church smelled of cedar and lilies. Light filtered through stained glass, painting everyone in soft colors. Jessica spotted me from across the aisle, her expression a mixture of shock and relief. She handed me the baby, a tiny bundle with eyes like summer sky, and whispered, her middle name's Samantha. For a second, I couldn't breathe. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she said. You saved me, you know. You showed me what starting over looks like. During the ceremony, I watched sunlight fall across Emma's face, and something inside me settled. Legacy isn't just buildings and contracts, it's the lives we touch without realizing it. Afterward, there was a small reception in the church garden. Mom fussed over pastries, Dad told stories that made even Jessica roll her eyes. When he caught me laughing, he smiled, an unguarded, genuine smile I hadn't seen in years. I still think about that day, he said quietly when we stepped aside. The phone call. The ticket. I wish I could take it back. You can't, I said. But you can remember why it hurt. He nodded. I do. Every day. We stood in silence, the kind that feels like forgiveness. Back in Chicago, work didn't slow down. Apex was expanding into Africa, and my schedule was a storm. But something about that trip lingered. I started mentoring younger women in the company, analysts who reminded me of the version of me who waited too long to speak. One of them, a nervous graduate named Talia, stayed after a meeting one day. Can I ask something? She said. How did you get here? Everyone says you just appeared one day at the top. I smiled. I didn't appear. I walked here. Every mile of it. You just didn't see the years when I was invisible. She grinned. Then I'll keep walking. That's the secret, I said. You keep walking even when no one's looking. A few months later, I received another call from Victoria. Her voice carried the edge of urgency I'd learned to respect. Your old company's on the brink, she said. They're losing major contracts. The board's collapsing. I'm aware. They've asked if Apex would consider buying them out. The irony nearly made me laugh. You're serious? Completely. Gregory wants your opinion. You know their systems better than anyone. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my apartment. Buying the company that had once ignored me felt poetic, but also unnecessary. Revenge was a young person's currency, and I'd outgrown it. Still, part of me wondered what closure might look like in a balance sheet. The next morning, I told Victoria, make the offer. But fair. No discounts, no gloating. Just business. She raised an eyebrow. You sure? Completely. 3 months later, the deal was done. My former employer ceased to exist, absorbed into the very structure they'd once dismissed me from. The press called it Apex's most strategic acquisition. For me, it was simply a circle closing. When the announcement went public, Mom called again. I saw the news, she said, pride softening every word. You must feel incredible. I feel complete, I said. She paused. Do you ever think about slowing down? All the time, I admitted. But not yet. Just promise me you'll stop when you've had enough. I smiled. I think that's how you know you've grown up, when you finally know what enough feels like. That night, I opened my window. Chicago's wind carried the faint scent of rain and gasoline. The city lights shimmered across the river like tiny reminders that even steel can glow /////. I thought of every step that had led here, every silence, every plane ticket, every lesson learned in languages I still couldn't fully pronounce. I had built an empire from absence. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anything. I was home. The first morning I woke without an alarm felt wrong. My body had been trained to rise before dawn, to chase numbers, flights, and inboxes that never emptied. But now, there was no urgency clawing at me. Just light, warm and still. ////. It had been 6 weeks since Apex completed the acquisition. The industry called it a masterstroke. Investors called it inevitable. I called it finished. For once, I wasn't building toward anything. I'd done it, turned invisibility into influence, exile into empire. But the strangest part of reaching the top of a mountain is the silence you find there. In the weeks that followed, I kept working out of habit more than need. Emails, reports, meetings. My team didn't require me to run anymore, they ran themselves, confident and capable. I'd built them that way. One afternoon, I looked around the boardroom and realized something almost frightening. They didn't need me. They were laughing, debating strategies, finishing each other's sentences. I was proud. And a little lost. Victoria noticed before I said a word. You've been quiet lately, she said during our weekly call. I'm thinking. That usually means trouble. I smiled. Not this time. Then what? I think I've finally reached the part of the story no one tells you about, what comes after enough. That night, I walked along the Chicago River. The air was cool, the city alive in that restless, glowing way only Chicago can be. I passed couples, joggers, a man playing saxophone under a bridge. His notes rose and fell like memory. I dropped a bill in his case and whispered, "Thank you," though I wasn't sure for what. Maybe for reminding me that creation doesn't stop just because you've finished one kind of song. When I got home, I opened the old leather journal I'd carried since Tokyo. Inside were pages of scribbles, ideas for projects, quotes from strangers, fragments of languages I'd tried to learn. Near the back, I found a note from years ago, written in a Bangkok café. "When you stop chasing, you start choosing." I smiled. It was time to choose. A week later, I met with Gregory and Victoria. "I want to step back," I told them. Victoria froze. "You're quitting?" "No. Transitioning. I want to mentor, not manage. Build something smaller within Apex, something human." Gregory leaned back, intrigued. "Go on." "I want to create an internal incubator for small, ethical supply chain startups. Give them what I never had, a chance to prove themselves before the world decides what they're worth." The silence that followed was the good kind, the kind that meant the idea had landed. Gregory smiled. "You're asking to trade power for purpose." "Maybe they're the same thing," I said. They approved it a week later. The Gray Initiative, a mentorship program inside Apex, fully funded, autonomous, experimental. My name on the door again, but this time for something that felt bigger than ambition. The first cohort arrived in the spring, 8 young professionals from around the world. Nervous, brilliant, unsure. They reminded me of every version of myself I'd ever been. I told them on the first day, "You're not here to impress anyone. You're here to build something that matters." One of them, a young woman from India named Arya, raised her hand. "What if we fail?" I smiled. "Then you'll learn faster than most people ever will." Watching them grow reignited something I thought I'd lost, the thrill of beginning. Every success they achieved felt like proof that legacy wasn't measured in titles, but in how many doors you left open behind you. That summer, I went back to Denver for the first time since Jessica's daughter's christening. The house looked smaller. The air smelled the same, pine and nostalgia. Mom was planting herbs in the garden. Dad waved from the porch. "You look peaceful," he said when I hugged him. "I think I finally am." He chuckled. "Never thought I'd see the day you slowed down." Neither did I. Inside, Jessica's kids were building Lego towers on the living room floor. Emma, the one with my name tucked into hers, looked up and grinned. "Aunt Sam. Look." I knelt beside her. "That's amazing. What are you building?" "A city," she said proudly. "One where everyone gets a house." I smiled so wide it hurt. "That's the best kind of city." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Jessica and I stood on the porch drinking lemonade like it was something holy. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "Me too. You ever think about, slowing down for good?" "Sometimes," I said. "But not today." When I returned to Chicago, the office lights felt warmer, less sterile. The people smiled when they saw me, not because of my title, but because of the work we were doing. The Gray Initiative was thriving. One morning, Talia, the young analyst I'd mentored, came to see me. She held a folder full of reports and excitement. We got our first partnership signed. 2 villages in northern Thailand, clean production, fair wages, export ready within months. I felt tears prick at the edges of my eyes. That's incredible, Talia. She beamed. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could, I said softly. You just needed someone to remind you that you could. When she left, I turned to the window again. The river shimmered below. Somewhere out there, another version of me was boarding a plane for the first time, thinking she was running away when she was really running toward herself. That evening, I went home and finally unpacked the last suitcase I'd never fully emptied. Out came the souvenirs, a ceramic bowl from Hue, a fan from Kyoto, a notebook from Prague, a small wooden elephant from Chiang Mai. I arranged them on a shelf, not as trophies, but as reminders. Each one whispered, you were there. You survived. You built. I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window as dusk settled over the city. My phone buzzed, a message from Jessica. Emma wants to visit Chicago. She says she wants to see Aunt Sam's tall building. I laughed and typed back, tell her it's not that tall. But she's always welcome. When the phone fell silent again, I whispered into the room, maybe this is what enough looks like. But enough, I realized, doesn't mean ending. It means foundation. A place to stand so you can see further. //////. And as the city lights came alive one by one, I felt it, the quiet joy of a life rebuilt not from what I'd been given, but from what I'd learned to claim. I heard the laughter before I saw them. ///// It echoed down the marble hallway of the Apex lobby, light, curious, like bells. When I turned the corner, there she was, a tiny girl in a yellow dress spinning circles under the sunlight spilling through the glass doors. Emma. My sister's daughter. The child named after the woman I used to be. Jessica followed close behind, trying to keep up while balancing 2 suitcases and an apologetic smile. She got excited, she said breathlessly. I knelt. Hey, sunshine. Emma stopped spinning long enough to look at me with wide eyes. Aunt Sam. She threw her arms around my neck, smelling of vanilla and crayons. Mom said you live in the clouds. I laughed. Almost. My office is on the 42nd floor. Can I see? You can see everything. Upstairs, I let her sit at my desk, her little legs swinging as she stared out at the skyline. It looks like a toy city, she whispered. Maybe it is, I said. People build it, play with it, and fix it when it breaks. Jessica stood quietly by the window, watching us. She's been talking about you non-stop, she said. Every time she sees a tall building, she says it's yours. That's dangerous, I teased. You'll make me sound important. You are, Jessica said softly. To me. To her. For a moment, the years between us disappeared. The arguments, the envy, the old wounds, they were still there, but smaller now, like scars on healed skin. I looked at my sister, older, gentler. You seem happy. I am, she said. But I also know happiness takes work. You taught me that. I smiled. Maybe we both had to lose something to figure out how to keep what matters. The next day, I took them both around Chicago, the Bean, the Riverwalk, the art museum. Emma tugged my hand everywhere we went, pointing at sculptures and fountains with the kind of wonder adults forget to feel. At lunch, she asked, Aunt Sam, what do you do? Jessica laughed. She runs a company, honey. Emma tilted her head. What's a company? I smiled. It's like a team that helps people build their dreams. Her eyes widened. Then I want to do that too. Good, I said. You'll be better at it than me. Later, as we crossed a bridge over the river, Jessica slowed. I wanted to tell you something, she said. I've been seeing a therapist. Working through us. That's brave, I said. It's overdue, she admitted. You were the first one to face the truth. I just followed your path. I reached for her hand. The path wasn't mine to keep. I just cleared it. That evening, they stayed at my apartment, Emma curled up on the couch, Jessica pouring wine in the kitchen. The city outside glowed like a constellation of everything we'd survived. You know, Jessica said quietly, Dad told me he wants to visit too. He said he's proud but afraid you'll turn him away. I looked at the skyline. I won't. But I need him to come as my father, not as someone seeking forgiveness. That part's already given. She nodded, tears brightening her eyes. He'll be relieved to hear that. We sat in silence for a while, the comfortable kind that comes only when you've run out of reasons to pretend. The next morning, Emma climbed into my bed at sunrise. Aunt Sam, she whispered, can we go to your work again? Sure, I said sleepily. But only if you promise to be my assistant. Okay. What does an assistant do? They remind me what's important. Her giggle filled the room, small and sacred. At the office later that day, my team greeted Emma like royalty. She handed out sticky notes, sat in on meetings, and asked questions no adult dared to, like why the graphs had to be so boring, and why coffee was the grown-up juice. Even Gregory stopped by to meet her, kneeling to shake her hand like she was a visiting diplomat. You're raising trouble, he told me, smiling. Trying to, I said. The good kind. When the day ended, Emma left a crayon drawing on my desk, a tall building with clouds around it and a tiny figure standing at the top waving. On the bottom she'd written, Aunt Sam's Sky House. I framed it that night. After Jessica and Emma flew home, the apartment felt emptier but lighter. I realized something, legacy isn't a monument, it's a mirror. Emma didn't see the CEO or the title. She saw the woman who'd made room for her in a world that had once forgotten its daughters. And that, I decided, was enough. Weeks later, a letter arrived, smudged with blue ink and a child's handwriting. Dear Aunt Sam, thank you for showing me your sky house. When I grow up, I want to build a bridge from your house to mine so we can always visit. Love, Emma. I read it 3 times before placing it on the same shelf as my souvenirs. For the first time, I realized the story wasn't just mine anymore. It was hers too. That night, I looked out at the Chicago lights and whispered, the bridge is already there, /////. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the past came knocking, quiet, professional, almost polite. ///// Patricia buzzed my office and said, there's a gentleman here asking for you. Says he used to work with you. He wouldn't give a name. I frowned. Send him in. The door opened, and I felt my stomach tighten. It was Martin Reynolds, my old CEO, the man who'd once sent polite congratulations when I'd taken over at Apex. Only this time, he didn't look polished or powerful. His hair was thinner, his shoulders bent slightly under the weight of something invisible. Samantha, he said, his voice careful. You look well. I am. I gestured to the chair across from me. Please. He sat, folding his hands. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I waited. The silence stretched until it almost broke him. I came to ask for your help, he finally said. After the acquisition, many of our old staff were let go. A few of them are struggling to find work. They asked if I could reach out to you. I studied him, this man who had once decided who mattered and who didn't. His tie was crooked, his eyes tired. Time had humbled him in ways I never could. Help how? I asked. Consulting positions, maybe. Or just advice. He hesitated. You don't owe us anything. But you always saw people, even when the rest of us didn't. For a moment, I wanted to say no. To let him feel what neglect tastes like. But revenge has a half-life, it fades once you've outgrown it. I leaned back. Send me their resumes. I'll see what I can do. His head jerked up. You'd do that? Of course. Everyone deserves another start. Even the ones who forgot to give me mine. He swallowed hard, and for the first time, I saw not a CEO, but a man of flawed, regretful, human. Thank you, Samantha. Don't thank me, I said. Thank the lesson. When he left, Patricia stepped in, eyebrows raised. That looked intense. It was overdue, I said. Closure always is. That night, I walked home through light rain. Chicago glimmered under street lamps, slick and beautiful. I thought about how strange life is, how people who once defined you eventually become visitors in your story. At home, I opened my email. The resumes were already there, neatly attached with a short note of gratitude. I spent an hour reading them, names I recognized, some I didn't. People who'd once ignored me in hallways or spoken over me in meetings. But the truth is, people change. I had. Why not them? By midnight, I'd forwarded 3 to HR with a simple message, consider for contract review. Potential value. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, it was evolution. A week later, Martin wrote again. I can't thank you enough. You've given people hope. It's strange how the ones we underestimate end up saving us. I stared at the line for a long time. Saving us. Maybe that's what this entire journey had been about, not just saving myself, but proving that redemption could exist outside apology. 2 weeks later, I flew to New York for a leadership summit. It was the kind of event that used to intimidate me, 300 executives in designer suits, all pretending their hearts didn't beat the same nervous rhythm. But this time, I felt grounded. I wasn't chasing approval anymore, I was offering perspective. During the panel, a young woman in the audience raised her hand. You talk about resilience, she said. But what about fairness? What do you do when people above you don't see your worth? The room went quiet. I smiled. You stop waiting for them to see you, I said. You build something so bright they can't look away. And when they finally do, you forgive them for being late. The crowd laughed softly, but I saw it, the look in that woman's eyes. Recognition. The quiet fire of someone who just decided to take her own first step. After the panel, she found me near the coffee table. I needed to hear that, she said. My boss keeps passing me over. I was thinking of quitting. Maybe you should, I said. Or maybe you should start building your version of quitting before you walk away. What do you mean? Use their walls to learn how to build your own house. She nodded slowly, a small smile forming. You did that, didn't you? Yes, I said. And it's still standing. Back in Chicago, life fell into its new rhythm, mentorship meetings, strategy sessions, late-night reflections. But one evening, as I was locking my office, Patricia handed me an envelope. This came by courier. No return address. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white, clearly old. It showed my grandmother standing in front of her bakery, smiling at the camera. On the back, written in faded ink, "Proud of you. Keep going." I sat down hard. My grandmother had passed years before. The photo must have come from Mom. But the timing felt almost divine, a reminder that legacy travels through unseen channels. I texted Mom. Did you send something to my office? Her reply came minutes later. Yes. Grandma kept that photo in her recipe box. She always said you had her eyes. I looked at the picture again and smiled. Then maybe that's why I can finally see clearly, I whispered. Later that night, I went up to the rooftop of my building. The wind was colder than usual, but the city looked infinite. I thought about the people I'd met, the bridges I'd rebuilt, the lessons I'd learned. Maybe the point of the story wasn't rising above them. Maybe it was learning how to reach back without falling. The next morning, I arrived early at the office. Emma's drawing still hung framed behind my desk, the sky house. Beneath it, I pinned Grandma's photo. 2 generations, 2 messages, build. Keep going. And I did. The email arrived at 6:42 a.m., right as the first light broke through the blinds of my apartment. ///// It was from Victoria, subject line, new opportunity, immediate response needed. I skimmed the message once, then twice. Apex wanted to expand again, this time into Dubai, establishing a global operations headquarters. They wanted me to lead it. Full relocation. 3-year term. Unlimited budget. Board-level authority. It was the kind of offer I would have once killed for. I stared at the words glowing on my screen, my reflection faintly visible behind them, the woman who'd built empires out of exile. And for the first time, I didn't feel adrenaline. I felt stillness. At 8 o'clock, I walked into the office early. Patricia was already there, coffee in hand, reviewing a report. You saw it, she asked, without looking up. I did. And? I don't know yet. She looked up then, eyebrow raised. That's not like you. I know, I said. That's why I'm paying attention. I spent the morning going through my usual motions, meetings, updates, reviews, but my mind kept drifting. Every question from my team felt heavier, because I knew what leaving would mean. They were capable now, independent. But this wasn't just about leadership. It was about presence. For years, I'd been running from invisibility, from mediocrity, from silence. But maybe I'd been running so long I didn't notice I'd finally reached somewhere worth staying. At lunch, I walked along the Riverwalk again, the same route I'd taken the night I decided to change everything. The saxophone player wasn't there anymore, but the memory of his music was. I found a bench, sat, and watched the city move. People in suits rushing past. Couples holding hands. Delivery bikes weaving through traffic. All those stories intersecting for moments and then splitting again. Maybe that was all life ever was, a series of intersecting stories, and the courage to decide when to keep walking beside someone and when to let them go. That evening, I called Victoria. "Tell me you're taking it," she said immediately. "I'm thinking." "Samantha," she sighed, "this is what we've been building toward. The global stage. The next chapter." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it's the same story with a different skyline." There was silence. Then, softer, "You're allowed to rest, you know." "I'm not tired," I said. "I'm rooted." For the first time. She laughed quietly. "That's the first time I've ever heard you say that word. It's the first time it's ever been true." The next day, I met with my team in the conference room, Patricia, Talia, the new hires from the Gray Initiative. I looked around the table and saw what I'd unknowingly built, a family made of choice, not obligation. "Big news," I began. "Apex offered me Dubai." The room went silent. "Are you going?" Patricia asked carefully. "I haven't decided yet. But I wanted you to know first." Talia spoke up. "You always told us to choose what builds us, not just what pays us. So, what builds you now?" Her words hit me harder than any boardroom question ever had. I smiled slowly. "Maybe this." That evening, I visited my parents' house. Mom was cooking, the smell of rosemary and butter drifting through the kitchen. Dad was reading in his armchair. "Dubai," Mom repeated when I told them. "That's far." "It is," I said. "You'll go, though. You always go." "Maybe not this time." They both looked up. "Why?" Dad asked. "Because for the first time, I don't need to prove anything. I built what I came here to build. Maybe it's time to build here." Mom put down her spoon, walked around the counter, and hugged me tightly. "You don't know how proud we are, sweetheart." I smiled against her shoulder. "You've said that a lot lately. And I'll keep saying it until you believe it," she said. That night, back home, I sat at my desk staring at Emma's drawing, Aunt Sam's sky house. Next to it, Grandma's photo. I picked up a pen and wrote a letter, not an email, not a text, but ink on paper. "Dear Victoria. Thank you for believing in me when I was still finding my voice. I've spent years running toward bigger stages. But I've learned something, not every mountain needs climbing. Some are meant to be foundations. I'm staying in Chicago. The team here is strong, the initiative is growing, and my work still feels alive. That's enough. With gratitude. Samantha." I sealed the envelope and felt something release, not resignation, but peace. Weeks passed. The Dubai project launched without me, led by another capable director. Apex continued to grow. And I stayed, teaching, mentoring, leading quietly but with intention. Emma visited again in spring. She wore a tiny blazer and carried a notebook. "I'm shadowing you today," she announced. "Oh? And what's your role, Ms. Intern?" She grinned. "Chief of Snacks." By noon, she had charmed the entire floor. Watching her walk confidently through the office, I realized something profound. Maybe this was the point all along. Not just to become seen, but to make sure no one like her would ever feel invisible again. Later that evening, I walked Emma and Jessica back to their hotel. The air was soft, filled with the hum of traffic and the scent of lilac from a nearby garden. Jessica squeezed my hand. "You did it, Sam. You built your sky house. And you kept the door open." I smiled. That was always the plan. That night, alone again, I stood by the window and whispered into the city. I'm staying. It wasn't an announcement. It was a vow. Because home isn't where you start. It's where you finally stop running. / The Chicago skyline shimmered like glass veins pulsing with light. / From my office, the same one Emma had once called the Sky House, I could see the river curve toward the lake, a silver thread stitching past and present together. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask for more. On my desk sat three things: a photo of Grandma, a framed drawing of clouds and skyscrapers by a 6-year-old, and a letter from Victoria's farewell dinner, handwritten, like mine had been. To Samantha. You taught this company that success is not noise, it's the echo that remains when you stop talking. Keep building. The world needs what you make. With respect, always. Victoria. I read it again, smiled, and leaned back. For once, I wasn't planning the next quarter or predicting the next expansion. I was simply here. That weekend, I took a train to Denver. It felt like closing a loop, 12 hours of rails humming under my feet, landscapes unfurling like memory. The mountains rose in the distance, same as ever, but I wasn't the same woman who'd left them behind. When the train stopped, Mom and Dad were waiting at the platform. Mom waved like she always had, her energy still uncontainable. Dad looked smaller now, but steadier. At home, we sat on the porch with lemonade. The conversation was easy. No tension, no ghosts. Just life, recipes, Emma's new school, the weather. The kind of talk that used to frustrate me because it felt like filler. Now it felt like grace. Do you ever miss it? Dad asked suddenly. The running? I thought about it. Sometimes. But then I remember how good it feels to stop. He nodded, satisfied. I was worried you'd outgrow us. I did, I said gently. But only so I could meet you again properly. Mom smiled, tears catching sunlight. That's our girl. A week later, I drove alone up into the Rockies. The air got thinner, the roads quieter. I stopped near a lake I hadn't seen since childhood, the place Dad used to bring us for picnics. I spread out a blanket and unpacked my laptop, intending to answer a few emails. But when the screen lit up, I closed it again. Instead, I opened a small notebook. The pages smelled faintly of ink and time. At the top, I wrote, what I learned when they forgot me. And I began to write, not reports, not projections, but truths. About silence and courage. About invisibility and how it teaches you to listen. About power that doesn't announce itself, and love that doesn't need applause. I wrote until the sun dipped behind the peaks, turning the lake gold. Months later, those pages became a book. The Sky House, Building Yourself When No One Else Does. It wasn't meant to be a bestseller, but it became one anyway. Emails poured in from readers, students, mothers, engineers, retirees, people who had been overlooked, underestimated, unseen. They wrote, "Thank you for reminding me I matter." I responded to every message I could. Sometimes late at night, between meetings. Sometimes early mornings before the city woke. Each reply felt like another beam in a house built not from glass and steel, but from empathy. Years passed. Apex grew into a global giant. I stayed in Chicago, mentoring, guiding, still walking the halls where my story had changed direction. Emma grew up. She visited each summer, taller every time, her eyes full of her mother's calm and my grandmother's spark. When she was 16, she interned at Apex. On her last day, she handed me a folded piece of paper. Dear Aunt Sam, you said once that your job is helping people build their dreams. I think mine will be helping them find the courage to start. Thank you for giving me mine. I couldn't speak for a long time. Just held her hand and whispered, you already have everything you need. Now, when people ask what success feels like, I tell them it's quiet. It doesn't shout or flash. It breathes. It looks like a Sunday morning sunlight hitting your desk. It sounds like your niece's laughter echoing through a skyscraper hallway. It feels like peace. Because revenge fades. Recognition fades. Even ambition shifts shape. But purpose stays. One evening, years later, I stood again at the top of the Apex building. The air was clear, the city below moving like constellations. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who cried over forgotten plane tickets and unanswered calls. If she could see me now, she wouldn't envy me. She'd thank me. Because every heartbreak, every silence, every no had led here, to a life not built on approval, but on authenticity. I whispered to the skyline. Thank you for forgetting me. It's the best thing you ever did. And as the city lights shimmered like stars, I finally understood. Home wasn't the house, the office, or even the view. Home was me. Thank you for listening to my story. It means the world to share it with you. If it moved you, please give this video a like and hit that subscribe button. It helps me keep telling stories like this one. Stay strong and I'll see you in the next one.